We ready to go, or?
You just can go ahead there, Jerry.
All right. Well, everybody knows me here on the program today, so I don't have to introduce myself.
No introduction needed.
No.
There you go. Let's see. How do I do this slide change here? I thought I had this in presentation mode, and I'm not getting it. Here we go. All righty.
Yeah.
So I wanted to start out with the RI theme of sow the seeds of love, and y'all might remember that 2002 and 2003.
I'm going to steal that image.
And our dear governor at that time, Lynn Morgan. So it's appropriate to be talking about gardening and the seeds of love today. So I'm gonna continue Lynn's theme today and sow a few seeds here. Okay.
There you go.
Awesome.
Boy, I'm impressed with how you kind of connect there with them.
I still remember him sowing the seeds of love all around the district that year. And just to let you know that it is appropriate for for me to be speaking. There I am, outstanding in my garden.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Good farmer that he is.
Outstanding.
No motorbike in sight.
I like your white hair and your white legs.
I have to give you a little bit of background. I grew up in Iowa on a farm. In fact, if you look at the Mississippi River, it forms the profile of Santa Claus. Okay, you got the Minnesota being the hat, Iowa the head, the belly Missouri, the pants Arkansas, and the boot Louisiana. I grew up basically about the wart on Santa Claus's nose. If you ever want to find my farm.
Right.
And if I zoom way in, this 230 acres or 224 thereabouts acres is the farm I grew up on. Okay, my brother still lives there. I'm the oldest of 7 kids. We own it, and we're in the process of actually, if anybody's excited, I've got a farm for sale if you want to go about doing gardening big time.
So
we grew up, like I said, I'm the oldest of 7 kids, and so we grew up basically fairly poor, and we raised basically most of what we ate, raised and canned and gardened and what have you. So I learned a lot about gardening, I guess, back then without even thinking about it.
Jerry,
give you a little value now. I live out in Davisburg, just outside of Davisburg. I live on 10 acres, or I live on 10 acres of land. I also rent another 6 acres, and it's about a good 45-50 minute drive from Farmington. Okay, and I know that for a fact because for about 14 years I drove that route back and forth every day. So my office used to be right down here at 12 and Haggerty.
I remember the office.
Zooming in, if you go into Google and you go to my place, this is an overhead view of my place. This frontage here from about where this intersection of dark trees goes to the road here, all the way down the road, and just before this tree line, back straight and up here at a big pie shape is my property. I also rent the 6 acres here that Consumers Power has, which got the Highline wires on it. And over the years, I've actually raised cattle in there as well as doing gardening, what have you. If I zoom in a little bit, there's our house from an overhead point of view, the house and the barn. Right now, when you see later the gardening I have, my gardens are actually right off of my deck here underneath this big tree. But I've grown bigger ones where I've had all of this in garden. Is my arrow showing through?
Yes, it is.
Yep.
Phil?
Yes.
Okay. All that was in garden, and then back here along this big long piece of field here, that was all in sweet corn at one time. So I've gone the full gamut. Next year I'm going to go smaller, is what my plan is.
Is that right?
Phil was talking a little bit before, and this is why I think Phil asked me to talk about this subject, is he's seen some of the produce pictures that I popped out this year, and these are just a few of them. My specialty is vegetables. I primarily grow vegetables and a fair amount of them. We freeze or can a fair amount of these sort of things. And so, in fact, just a couple days ago, we finished up the potatoes that I grew. this
I
year.
failed-
And we've had last night we had one of these squashes. It was awesome. Tonight we're having one of these spaghetti squashes. So we still eat a fair amount from the gardens, even though it's just Debbie and I nowadays.
You'll need to talk to me about potatoes. I failed miserably this year on potatoes.
Oh, potatoes? Oh, well, I can tell you some ideas about that. They're relatively easy, but you want to get away from clay soil, so.
I have a terrible soil for that.
But yeah, you could actually grow them in a bale of straw if you wanted to.
Well, I bought some of
Just
those
water,
growing- I bought some of those growing bags to try that next year.
And then, I grow a little bit of everything. I got zucchini, and these are all a bunch of garlic. Those I end up growing over the winter, actually.
Wow.
And they come back up in the spring, and in middle of summer is when I'll pull some of them, then I'll replant. Onions, leaf lettuce in the spring, early spring. My favorite is peas. That's my favorite vegetable in the garden, absolutely, which I plant a lot of peas. These are all like 2.5 by 5 foot bed boxes. And I will put 5 rows of peas along there that grow up into I have a fencing here, I'll show you later, but they grow together into a bunch. And I will grow 4 or 5 boxes of these just to get a lot of peas.
Wow.
And that's my favorite in the garden.
I'd
Takes a
love
fair
to-
amount of work, but I've discovered I got 4 little grandchildren that just love to come over and help me pod those peas. And that's great. My kids would never do that. My kids would never do that. The only problem is the grandkids will eat like 1 out of 3, but whatever. Cheap labor.
It's worth it.
Yeah. And then after that's probably tomatoes. There's nothing better tasting than a garden tomato.
I agree.
Buying the store tomatoes just doesn't do it, for me anyway. So
No.
I grow and I try to grow different varieties of tomatoes, and so that's probably my second favorite.
Yep. I grow a lot of tomatoes.
Oh, I want to back up too. I don't know if you knew it or not, and I just learned it this year. I'm always learning something new every year, and I think that's a way to do gardening. Start out small and learn a little bit each year, and add something else in. And I'm probably going to grow a little more. I figured out to grow 1 zucchini. If you grow 1 zucchini plant, you've got enough zucchini for a block of people. Okay. But
No
I
question
found
about
out that all your squash plants, including the zucchini, all of the squash plants, the flowers are edible. And there's some cool recipes out there where you kind of dip them in egg or brush them with oil or whatever and cook the flower. And the flowers are supposedly quite tasty. So that's something I'm going to be doing next year, is working some of the flowers, because I get more zucchini than I care to have anymore.
Supposedly, the flowers are good for you. They're a very healthy part of the plant. So
One of the members of my club, the guy from Mexico, is what sent me my original recipe about that. I've got to try them now.
Well,
I grow typically 1 or 2 plants of hot peppers every year. Okay. These are jalapenos on the right. The other ones are cayennes. And a little story, earlier in the year, they were all yellow like this. This is when they were just starting to turn red. They were all yellow like this. And there's a sweet yellow pepper just like this. And I couldn't remember what I planted. I throw things out there and don't worry about it typically. And so I thought, oh, these look great because they're nice yellow. And they went from green to a yellow, and I took a bite into one and couldn't talk for about 15 minutes. And I'm like, ooh, that was bad news. And then I've been drying them, and ever since I started drying them in the house, Debbie's had this label on them, Devil Candy. She will not touch those hot peppers.
I never tried
They're very
drying.
hot.
Never tried drying.
I'll tell you another story about drying them. As years ago, my first exchange student, we've had 9 exchange students over the years, and our very first one, I had to run her down to a thing at Farmington Rotary, I think it was. And just prior, this is in February, and I had these things strung across our curtain in our kitchen, drying on a thread, okay? And I wanted to see, I grind these up to use them for hot peppers on pizzas, is what I do.
Wow.
And they looked pretty dry to me, so I rubbed them to see if they would crinkle, to tell whether it was time to grind them. And they weren't crinkly yet. And I said, okay, didn't worry about it. halfway down to Birmingham, my eyes started burning horribly. The oils had gotten in my fingers, and I'd rubbed my eye, and oh my God, was that horrible. So they can burn you in more ways than one.
I've got a whole bunch of those in the freezer. I need to watch what I do with them then.
I said, yeah, be careful. The oils on that skin can get you. I said, you know, I generally do vegetables. Debbie does the flowers. She focuses on flowers for the butterflies. By the way, Phil, she does a presentation on monarchs, if your club's never had that.
Nope.
On butterflies. She does it quite a bit. She's done that probably for, I don't know, a dozen different clubs, and some of them get her every year. I think the Ann Arbor North Club has her do an update every year with that. Anyway, so I have a number of fruit trees. The ones that grow easiest are peaches. Peaches grow very easy around here, and you don't have to do a whole lot with them. Other trees, like my apple trees, if you don't remember to spray them early on, you're going to have worms. That's just basically it, you know. And so I don't do very well with my apples, but I do great with my peaches and my cherries and that stuff. And I have strawberries. Oh, wait a minute. Did I miss one?
There we go. Strawberry.
Yeah, this is out of order, but okay. Rhubarb. This is rhubarb. I've got 4 big patches of rhubarb, so I'm constantly giving away rhubarb in the springtime. And then I got blueberries. I've got probably a dozen blueberry plants around, and one of them now is about 7 or 8 feet tall, so getting some decent picks off them. We have a lot of, these are all blackberries that are wild around here, so I usually pick 2 or 3 quarts of those every year. And then I, oh, hang on, I gotta deny something here.
Sure, no problem.
And then I also grow black raspberries and red raspberries as well. So, and I have 1 grape arbor as well. And like I said, we do a fair amount of canning and freezing of these items when we grow them. Lately, though, more often than not, I try to give them away. Interestingly enough, my kids all grew up with, you know, having to help in the garden. And I swore they'd never have a garden. But both of my daughters have big gardens now, and they can. So this is our garden in the springtime. You can start a garden just about any way you can think of. I mean, all you got to do is dig up a hole. And originally, that's what I did is I'd either spay or actually my big garden I started with, I had a friend come in with a tractor and a plow and turned over the land and just got into it with a rototiller and got it all broke up pretty good. And got gardens started. Now in the last, I don't know, 10, 11 years ago, when I didn't have kids anymore to help me, I put in the raised beds. I like having to be able to put a board across between them and sitting down to weed or pick or whatever and not having to go all the way to the ground for that. So that's a big deal. Plus, these are easier to keep the weeds back when they're raised like this. I made this all from scrap wood I had laying around for the most part. And I made them, these are basically 2.5 by 5 foot long beds. I had, most of this wood is that pressure treated wood. So I got worried about that. So I've got every one of them coated inside with black plastic. But and then I got dirt. I had regular topsoil brought in and mixed with compost and peat that I got ordered in from a local place that delivered that stuff. And I mixed it all and put it in here.
Come on in and sit down.
She's peeking around the corner.
So
there you are.
Thank you.
So anyway, this is our garden, and you can start a garden any way you want. And like I said, if it was me and you didn't have a garden, start small. Start with one. Start with your favorite vegetable. This is what mine looks like every spring when I'm getting ready to go in.
I have a garden.
Like there's the simple setup that I had.
I have a garden.
What's that?
I have a garden about that size.
That size? You can grow a fair amount in that little bit of garden.
Yep. But I get tons of tomatoes.
I swear mine's going to be smaller next year, but it always changes. And the other thing I like about doing the raised beds is I can do concentrated plantings. And I do. I mean, typically, normally you'd want onions about 18 inches apart.
Uh-huh.
And I pay a lot more attention to them, and 6 inches apart on row and 8 inches apart on row and 6 inches apart in between in the row. And I'm able to plant them a lot thicker than that and get a lot out of them, actually. Same with the beans. I plant those typically 3 or 4 rows wide in these boxes. Those are potatoes back there in the corner there, Phil.
Did you say, Jerry, did you say that you lined each box with plastic?
I did when I built them. I got the outside edge. They're bottomless boxes, okay? But the sides I had plastic because I had made these originally, and it wasn't yet weathered, pressure treated wood.
Okay.
And so I didn't want that leaching back into the ground.
Right.
Are you going to come, Jerry, to watering them?
I'm not going to talk about that too much, but
Well,
you
yeah,
can overwater things, or you can underwater. But yeah, I do water. I wasn't planning on talking about that today.
No, you obviously got to get water to it.
You can.
We'll have another meeting.
I have a hose nearby, so
Okay.
But as far as my peas, I mean, you can use a lot of things very simple. You don't need to get into a lot of expense. This is just 2-foot high fencing, and I use it over and over again. I just got it boxed in. This is what I grow my peas in. I put 4 simple little posts. I just kind of push in the ground, wrap that fencing around it, and then I'll plant a row on each outside of the thing. I'll plant a row on the inside of each one, and sometimes I plant a row down the middle, and the peas will grow on his and support themselves without falling over.
And is that to stop the kids or the deer?
No, it doesn't stop. That's just for support. That's just so the peas have something to grow up on. That's all that's for.
Oh, the netting.
I have not had, in the 30-some years now that I've been here doing this stuff, or 20 years, I've never had problems with deers. I have one problem one year where the deer ate the tops off my peas one time. And then for a lot of years, we've had no problems. This year was the first year I had any problem at all. And I ended up putting a fence around my whole garden this year. My problem I don't know what happened, but normally our 2 German Shepherds, we only have 1 German Shepherd now. Maybe that's it. But the German Shepherds, we have outdoor German Shepherds, and the deer never come into our yard. So
I'll bet they don't.
I never had a problem with that. When I built those boxes, I did put this on the bottom of each one. And then if I'm putting in a new garden, I use a lot of this. This is just basic ground cloth that you can buy at any hardware store. I bought this probably at Costco, to be honest with you. And it comes in different widths, but it's just a woven type fabric. Okay. I put that down as block to block the weeds from growing, and it does a fairly decent job. So I'll lay it down in here and staple it inside this piece right on that ground, and most of the stuff won't grow. Most of the weeds won't grow. And then I slice it to put in where my seeds are.
Right.
If I'm putting in a brand new garden, I'll put this crisscross twice thick over the garden. It's black plastic some people use, but black plastic, water doesn't go through, so you can only water the plant. I like to water the whole ground, so that's why I use this sort of ground cloth on everything. And then you can put mulch on top of that, and that further assists keeping the weeds from growing.
Yeah, and that also keeps the water moisture in there too.
Yeah, I've never understood, they sell a lot of tomato cages short, 3-foot max.
Yeah.
And I've never understood why. My tomatoes all grow 4, 5, 6 foot high. They'll grow as high as I got a rack, basically. And so I've made my own. These are actually, they're cattle panels. They're 4 foot high by 12 foot long. And I'll cut them off, and I cut them off. I use a bolt cutters, and I cut them about 6 foot. I cut each one into 3 pieces, I guess it is, and then I just bend them over, and I do a spot weld on them, and these become fantastic cages. They've just been great cages for me. I probably got 30 of them.
Jerry, can I ask
tomato
a
cages?
Question about tomatoes? Do you trim your tomatoes?
I don't. I've done some lately for a reason, and I got some tips about that. Let's bring that back up again in a second.
Okay,
Actually, it's going to be in 2 slides, okay?
sure.
Some tips that I've learned over the years, and there's 1,000 things I've forgotten, but you can't do gardening wrong. You might not get a produce on something, but you had fun doing it. So new gardens, I always use a ground cloth. If I'm cutting a new place somewhere, I've got the ground cloth on top of that. You can try and sort out all the little pieces of the grass and all the little weeds and all the little roots. You'll spend a nightmare doing it, and they'll still germinate, and you'll still have weeds. So I just basically till it all up and cover it with 2 layers of ground cloth. And that's where I start when I'm doing new garden stuff. My recommendation, if anybody's starting, is to start easy. Start with just a few things, and then next year add something else. Then experiment and have fun. That's what I've done over the years. I've grown okra, I've grown celery, I've grown a variety of peppers. I just play with it, and you can come up with some fun stuff. When you do a first year, if you're digging in like in your yard fresh the first year, you might not need to do anything with fertilizer. Okay, the second year and beyond, you want to. I've learned over the years that I prefer to use natural fertilizers, buy composted manure if you can. Never buy. I've never had any luck with any kind of horse manure. You don't want to buy horse manure. You want to buy. You generally want manure that comes from either sheep or cows, generally, because they have the multiple stomachs, and anything they eat, the seeds they eat, get digested by going through those different stomachs. A horse has 1 stomach, and basically when you buy horse manure, you got fertilized weed seed. So it's got to be extremely well composted, and I've never come across that for horse manure. So composted cow manure is usually readily available in the different stores, and that works better than any of the pellet stuff that you can buy, for fertilizers for your garden.
Do you compost regularly?
We had chickens for a lot of years. We haven't had them in a couple of years, and I just dug up the ground around the chicken coop and used that this year for fertilizer. My God, was that great. So I haven't done corn in a while. My recommendation about corn is plant it in blocks. I'm an Iowa boy. I grew up on corn farm. We always had sweet corn, but we grow it as a section of the field corn in the field. We'd plant sweet corn, and we always had great sweet corn. And then for, I don't know, half a dozen years, maybe 10 years of my life since Debbie and I have been in Michigan, I've grown rows of sweet corn and never getting anywhere more than nubbins. And then finally I figured out you got to plant corn in blocks. You can't plant it in a row. You need at least 4 or 5 or 6 rows wide to do corn. So if you're going to do sweet corn, you need to plan on doing that, because otherwise it just doesn't germinate properly.
Hey, Jerry.
Or not germinate, but
Pollinate.
Hey, Jerry.
pollinate properly between each other. Yeah.
Jerry, I just need a second. Can you ask Debbie if she'll contact me? I think now would be a good time for her to come in and talk to us. I assume going into the spring would be a good time to get the proper flowers into gardens, so we have lots of butterflies coming through.
Oh, she's got a lot for that. I will have her do that.
We'll take a presentation. We need one in early December.
Okay.
We'll work
Then
out
this is where we're going to talk about tomatoes. Okay.
Awesome.
I've done a lot of tomatoes over a lot of years, and generally for me, anything less than 16 plants I probably haven't grown less than 16 plants in 40 years, I guess. I don't know. I've learned over the years, buy your plants. You can do the seeds. You can you can do some really great stuff with seeds. But there's 2 problems with seeds. One, you got to start in February. It takes a long time. Buy the plants. I buy the plants. It seems to me, and I wouldn't waste my money buying the bigger plants. I've bought plants as high as 3 foot tall when I put them in the ground. I bought plants that were 6 inches, and for some reason, they both produce tomatoes about the same day when it comes through the year. So, I wouldn't waste money on the bigger plants myself. But I do buy plants. The other thing with doing the seeds, you risk, and tomatoes are very susceptible to diseases. and the plants are. And so you risk propagating diseases growing them. There's so many available, I would just buy the plants. Tomatoes are high users of nitrogen, big time. Corn, sweet corn is too. Lightnings, yeah, and just to give you a little thing about nitrogen, y'all, I don't know if you all noticed or not, I love rainstorms. I really do. I love them, particularly in the springtime. And the very first lightning storm you see in the spring, you have to watch, but you'll notice the very next day, everything is so much greener. That's the big green change in the spring. There's nitrogen modules in the soil, natural nitrogen modules in the soil. And when the lightning, the static electricity in the lightning causes a release of those modules in the soil. And that sudden release of nitrogen being available to the plants is what turns those things green overnight. It's pretty cool. One of the things that you can do for tomatoes is you really want to remember where you planted last year, your tomatoes the last couple of years, because you want to rotate them. You want to move them every time. You don't want them in the same place the next year, ever. For the one reason, they're going to pull out more nitrogen than you can put in there. Peas and beans put nitrogen in the soil. And so putting tomatoes where your peas or beans were the prior year is a good place to put them. A good way to add nitrogen is you can buy added nitrogen specific fertilizers. And if you're going to use composted organic type stuff, chicken or any of the fowl manures is very high in nitrogen. Leaf rot is something I have a lot of problems with. And part of the reason I have problems with it is being in those raised beds. And on top of that, I've had those in the same place for a lot of years. And so that leaf rot disease, and that's basically the bottom of the tomato plant starts turning yellow and brown and black and comes up the plant and you lose the leaves and such. And that happens a lot more often in raised beds and in your patio containers than it does in just a natural ground garden. The key to keep that to its minimum is to buy your plants from different nurseries each year. Don't go to the same place, because otherwise that again can propagate. And then buy varieties with those extra letters on them. They'll say VF or VFN. They'll say whatever, say Roma, and then in parentheses VF or VFN. Those are more resistant to the diseases that are susceptible or the tomatoes are susceptible to. And like I said, move them around the different locations. And something else I've learned new. Cherry tomatoes are very super easy. But I've learned something brand new this year that actually helped my gardens a lot. And that, let's see, is right here. Save your eggshells through the year. That's about probably 3 dozen eggshells right there. But I take them, I save them, I rinse them out after I use them. I keep them in this big, I got a big plastic jar. And when the jar gets full, I bake them for about 20 minutes in the oven. And then I put them in a food processor and make them into this dust type stuff. And you sprinkle that around the base of that tomato, and that kills or retards a lot of that leaf rot. You're asking more about trimming. I don't trim tomatoes at all. I trim off some of the shoots at the very base. And when I plant, I take off the first, there's 2 big nubbin type leaves. I take those off and I'll plant that plant down 3 or 4 inches. I'll put that root bulb 3 or 4 inches below the ground. So anywhere you put that stem all the way down the ground will generate more roots. And so you can get a lot better root structure by planting that plant. Even though the plant might be 8 inches tall, I'll plant like 4 inches of it down in the ground, of the stem down in the ground. And then, like I said, I add these to it right now. And then I watch it through the year, and it starts developing that black stuff on the leaves and stuff. I start trimming those leaves off, and that seems to hold it back a little longer.
Okay.
My mother always used to say that if she clipped the branches where there were flowers but no obvious fruit, that it would force the fruit to grow bigger and better. And so that was kind of the reason that I asked the question. If you trim for bare.
That's true about it. Yeah, that's true about any plant. Watermelon, for example, or even your pumpkins, they'll grow lots and lots of stems and they'll go forever. And after I get a pumpkin or two on a vine, I'll cut it off, and I'll just chop it off at that point, because then you're not feeding as much stuff with the plant. So that is true about every plant. I just have never really done it with tomatoes. I've never had any problem with those. I do it with some of my fruit trees. If you cut half the sprouts off of your peach trees, you'll have guaranteed to have bigger peaches. So. I've done it for melons. I've done it for pumpkins. I've done it for our squash, that sort of thing. Anything with a vine.
I had a miniature watermelon, 2 of them actually this year, and the one had about an 8 or a 10-foot stringer that went out way past the fruit, and I didn't cut off the end of it, but I really should have, because they really didn't grow what I thought they should do, but they were really good.
Those guys that grow those giant vegetables, like the giant pumpkins,
yeah,
that's a particular variety for one. But number 2, they will chop everything off but that one vine going to that pumpkin when they're raising those. Then they do things like milk jug IVs to them and stuff like that. Peas, like I said, for me, I've learned to plant them in rows next to each other, and I use that fence caging in the middle and plant around that, and that just gives them all great support for growing peas. Beans, I've grown pole beans and I've grown bush beans. You have to have, they're easier to grow, the pole beans are. You have to have a trellis of some sort, but they're a lot easier to grow, easier to pick, whatever. My wife doesn't like the taste of them as much as she likes the bush beans, so we end up with more bush beans. And then the other thing that's cool to plant in your garden is marigolds. That's the one flower I do plant. There's a large variety of insects that stay away when you got marigolds. And so I plant a lot of marigolds around. I usually plant 1 or 2 in each one of those boxes that I have. And they look pretty. If by chance you're interested in, I have a greenhouse. I watched for a while, I think it was Craigslist at the time I was watching, and somebody had this one. This is 8 foot wide, 8 foot tall, 12 foot long. And I bought it for, I think, $250. I had to move it. So it was a nice deal. That's probably a $2,500 greenhouse right there. I've used that quite a bit. I've learned that I don't grow peppers in there. I never have any good production if I put peppers in there, but tomatoes go crazy. And right now, I'm still getting tomatoes, cherry tomatoes right now. And I got a couple other ones that are still producing. As long as the frost isn't hitting them hard, next to the windows and stuff, I'm losing some of the plant, but I'm still getting quite a few tomatoes.
I'm still picking cherry
It's late in the year.
They're all outside. I don't have a greenhouse.
I did something a little bit different. I have a tiller on the back of my tractor, and I rent 6 acres of land under Consumers Power. So I tilled up an area about 30 or 40 foot wide, and I planted bunches of mini pumpkins, and then I just let it go. I put mini pumpkins, eggplant. I've never grown eggplant before, and cherry tomatoes out in this field. I had peppers out there too. The deer ate off all the peppers, surprised the heck out of me. They didn't touch any of the other stuff. I thought they'd eat the pumpkins. So my grandkids had a blast picking these little bitty pumpkins in a party we had there a couple weekends ago. The only thing is they asked me, they said, "Grandpa, next year, will you grow big ones too?"
Talk to the deer.
And that's basically what I had thrown together today, and was going to throw it open to any questions you had about anything with it.
I have a question for you. If the community was interested, and I'm talking about Farmington in this case, in something like a community garden, is that something you'd recommend a club get involved in?
I've never heard of a club doing a project like that. There are communities. My wife grew up with community gardens, where she grew up in Marion, Iowa, which is a suburb of Cedar Rapids, fairly populous area there. And on the outside edge, the city had some land they owned, and they partitioned off. They had water there for everybody to have access to, and they partitioned off 20 by 40 acres or 20 by 40 feet or 10 by 20. I forget what they did sections, and you could get one or more sections or whatever and do your own planting, whatever in there, which is something that you guys could maybe do if that was something you're interested in.
Well,
The problems they had that they did a lot of it, but they also lost produce to people walking by, basically that, oh, their tomatoes look better than my tomatoes. I'll take a few of them. So there is some small farm things out here that are membership type things. And they've done membership deals where it was all one big garden, and then when the produce comes in, so say they have a dozen members and they get 2 dozen tomatoes, they'll give 2 tomatoes to everybody, and that's another approach to maybe doing something like that, and some people have done that.
I'm just thinking, as a really small club, the little effort that we could do might sustain a small plot where the produce that we get, we just give to all the local organizations that need food, and that's all we do. But it would have a Rotary name on it.
I'm not ready to put the effort into it yet because I'm still trying to get my I-Mission thing off the ground. But we have some land in our mission down in Guatemala that I'd like to turn into a community type gardens and such there. Actually, I have a vision of doing macadamia nuts. It's a good cash crop. A tree lasts for hundreds of years, I guess, or whatever. So if that could turn into a community cash crop for these people, plus it's a great source of protein and such for those people and nutrients.
Good idea.
But that's long term. That might be 10, 15, 20 years down the road. Who knows?
That gives you something of the sustainability that an annual garden like tomatoes and other things, that's something that you really have to work at every year. Where sure, some time is important for the macadamia possibilities, but short-lived. You probably have to treat them once a year, and from then on, it's basically harvest whenever they produce. Yep. The nuts that
there's different plants like that around the world, and actually everybody thinks of macadamia nuts coming from Hawaii. They don't. They come from Central America. But they are they're an interesting product. There's a fellow I ran into down there who does a very big nonprofit associated with that, and he's working with the Mayans closer around Antigua, which is further south from where I'm at. But I'm liking the idea. There a lot of the different problems they have, the indigenous have, is lack of access to high quality foods. They eat a lot of corn with a little bit of tortillas, and that causes a lot of issues for them. And so this would be an amazing supplement. Plus the produce is enough that they could have a cash crop out of it as well. So anyway, that's a long-term thing for me.
Well,
similar to your question.
I forgot I had so many farmers on here.
Yeah, thanks, Jerry, for your presentation. Carol and I like to think that we're gardeners of some sort. And I always grew up in a garden back when I was a kid. Brings back a lot of memories. I got a few hints here today. So I'm going to sign off.
Your one hint is to get a photo of yourself outstanding in your field, right?
Yeah, you were staying outstanding in the garden. Well, I like to think I'm out in the field once in a while.
Well, we got your photograph of planting the fruit.
And I made note of the fact that you certainly were outstanding in the field if you came from Iowa. That's corn.
Outstanding in that field quite a few times.
That's corn country for sure. Guess where we're going tomorrow? We're going with the grandchildren, 3 of them, down in Guelph, and we're going to be going out into a corn maze.
Hey, nice.
Oh my!
Keep our distance.
Don't get lost.
Yes. Yeah.
We'll send out a bunch of PDGs to find you, Barry.
Somebody sent me a photo. Corn maze for old people. I might have been one of my grandkids.
Yeah, it had
I don't know.
One corn stalk.
There's one corn stalk.
I saw that photo too. I didn't like it.
Well, guys,
It's bad when we start representing those things.
Yeah, was that on Facebook somewhere? I don't know. Now I got to remember.
Yeah, it was on Facebook. Yeah.
Yeah, it was. But like I said, one of my grandkids popped it to me.
Oh, is that right? Yeah. Well,
Okay.
thanks, Jerry. I'm going to sign off here.
Oh, you know what? I need to stop sharing, don't I?
Oh,
That's okay. You can do
How
that.
do I do? Where's that at?
There we go.
There we
I
go.
mean,
Okay.
now all I get is Phil. Oh, that looks like background from Guatemala, for Pete's sakes. The volcano there, Jerry.
Actually, that's Agua. You know what? You've been to Antigua.
Yes.
When you look to the south, that's Agua.
Yes.
Well, this one's now you're off, when you're looking to the south at Agua.
Yeah.
Off to your right is the two big volcanoes there. The one that's erupting all the time, Fuego,
Yeah.
and Acatenango. Acatenango is about there's a campsite at about 12,000 foot up on Acatenango, and that's where this photograph was taken.
Oh, very good.
6 a.m. in the morning.
Yeah. Well, I got up early in the morning.
Yeah, I've been up there twice now, and watching that other volcano overnight. It's amazing.
I just couldn't get over.
I've been to there's 3 live volcanoes in Guatemala, and I've hiked next to all 3 of them.
Good for you.
And saw them all erupt.
I just couldn't get over one time. I went up on the roof to see the one, and I realized, my gosh, that thing is puffing. I wasn't expecting it.
Yeah. Well, I've taken live video from right here at night, watching that thing blow. Actually,
Yeah, but
actually, I think I've got and I've been on top of Pacaya, and Pacaya has constant lava flow.
Yeah.
I've roasted marshmallows on the lava flow. So
I see. Good sharing with you this afternoon. I'm gonna pull out of here now. Have a good
Yeah, we
evening.
all are.
Okay.
Yep.
Good to see you, Barry.
Thank you
Yeah.
very much. It was a great presentation. I think folk are really going to be surprised by what they see.
all right,
All
y'all
right, guys.
take care.
Thanks,
See you
Jerry.
later.
Bye now.
Good presentation. Loved it.
Thank you. Bye-bye.